private for now so that we can change it if needed. Great. Okay, so welcome. This is October the 5th, 2022. This is our APAC EMEA orchestration demo. So let's just run through a little quick action check-in and see if there's anything we need to follow up here. So I had an action from last week, which was just to check in with configure and make sure that we kind of knew they were on board and kind of knew where we stood. So I think that's looking good. They're certainly on board for managed auto deploys. Alessio, you had an action to check in with Pages maintainers about managed versions for Pages.
Yes, I did. Only missing one maintainer. Overall, the reaction was very positive. I pinged him, but yeah,
cool.
No answer. I mean, he answered me, told me that he was going to look at this Monday because I pinged Friday evening, and then he probably slipped through. So I will re-ping. But overall reaction was very positive.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Good. And then Myra has added in her update. So she's completed the Gitly analysis issue and added in a kind of overview there. So that's good. And Myra has also completed the test to make sure that Pages can build from SHA. So nice set of progress. So yeah, let's jump to number 2, Alessio.
Sure. So I was taking a look at the overall status of the. So how can we move to implementation phase of this? So I spent some time doing some polishing here and there. So the first thing. So this is all implementation, right? So 2607 is the very first thing we need, and is a refactoring for being able to gather the currently deployed version. At the same time, if only we had enough engineer to parallelize the work, we could start the next issue, which I edited a bit to fill in the details on the other step outside of the public release. So when I say we can do this in parallel, what I mean is that up to a certain point, there is a good degree of non-interaction between the two things. So the public release page, the Pages release could be developed in the meantime, even though we still don't have a way to retrieve the deployment version, because until we link this into the real release process, which is not the last step, the one before, basically it makes nothing. So we can start building and ticking off those things and testing on a fork or something like that to see if it's working. Yep. That one is these are the two implementation side of it. I was reviewing Myra work on CNG and Omnibus, and I noticed that there is actually a bug in the CNG image that is not reporting the right version. Not in our case, in any case. So every CNG Pages image is just reporting them not real, not accurate version. So I have made this merge request, which is in review. I have to see. Still have to check comments because I was reviewed overnight, I think. And then the last section of this, it's all about rolling this out. So creating the stable branches for the old releases and things like that. So it's not a lot of work. It looks reasonable, say, to accomplish this by the end of the quarter, but then it depends on availability. And so in ideal world, there should be enough time to close this, but yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for putting that together. Yeah. And I mean, I was saying to Graham just a little earlier that I think capacity things are unfortunate, but fine, right? Like as we came into this quarter, I think we expected to have a bit more capacity for lots of good reasons. We haven't had as much. So I'm completely fine with that. And it's good, I think probably just a really good one for us to have in mind as we go into Q4, right? What I will do, so Myra is back same day as me, so next Thursday. I will ask that she picks up that refactor for the deployment finder as her kind of first task. She's around only for about a week and a half before a conference, but hopefully that would be enough time for her to get that refactor completed, and at least we've got that big step moved along. And then I'll ask her, if you get kind of capacity, then perhaps you can do the public release class for pages as a kind of follow on from that.
Just a question about the refactor, just to help me understand more than anything. So I know that we've got the release metadata repo, and that contains like all the files for like every auto deploy, you know, all the version and it's a JSON file. How do we know which one of those is actually what's running on .com at the moment? Like, I'm just trying to understand, do we just look at the files, or do we look at the releases in that repo? Because it's the environments, and you're muted.
You're right. So yeah, this is a great question. We are tracking deployments. So you will see a fake deployment. I mean,
Gotcha.
It's a real deployment.
Yeah.
And it links to the file.
Okay, cool. So,
but
yeah,
this is all already No, maybe the deployment finder not. Basically, the product version class already handled this thing. So you can give them, you can ask, give me what's inside this version, and we just give you all the components. So
yeah, so basically, instead of now like looking at the 3 spots for their deployments, we're just looking at the one. But then we will still need to actually get that, like, well, that will give us a version, right? But then we need to get the file and read from that, extrapolate out like the bits of data we need, correct? So this
the class helper just gives you the representation of the components in the deployment. So it gives you the SHA. So you can definitely ask, tell me it's already in the class. Once you have a product version, which is a class, you can tell me, in this product version, give me Gitly, and it would tell you the SHA of Gitly. So you don't have to just download. I mean, it's already made in release tools.
Okay. So we're not actually using the data that's in the metadata release repo.
Yeah,
like
sure. Yes, we are. Yeah, I'm saying that the class itself is already handling
doing that data. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And just as I said, just to understand. Okay, so those files will really be moving towards like the actual single source of truth for this kind of stuff. That repo and those classes and and those files, which makes sense. I'm just clarifying.
Cool. Sounds good. We may also well, we're expecting as well, Matt will be back at some point, hopefully this quarter as well. So we may also have some additional kind of Ruby capacity there. He could probably pick up one of these tasks. So I agree that we're looking pretty good. I think that I feel like the big things with the pages were actually the kind of the understanding and defining managed versioning and getting the maintainers on board. So I think we're looking pretty good there.
Yeah, I also think that this could easily apply as well for CAS. So if for any reason we have troubles or problem to apply this on pages, we could. I mean, we are starting implementation, so we are still in time to switch to target and do this for CAS because it's unrelated to the managed auto deploy. That is the other thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when we do this first, I suspect we're going to find a bunch of issues like we need to refactor this or whatever. It would be, I don't want to drag them too much together, but I would really hope that because we have to do pages and we have to do CAS, I would hope we can try and make the CAS one almost literally like a cut and paste, like very little independent logic. It should really be almost identical to the pages one. Like we could try and as we work through the pages, really be thinking about how can this be just like almost can this be almost identical for CAS as well? Not like, oh no, you have to do something special, because both those components, especially once they get the full managed versioning stuff, they should be very similar in how they work, and from our perspective of like packaging and deploying them.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. I'm thinking that we will end up extracting a basic version also from Githly itself, because it's running the same.
Right.
They just have the extra complexity of the gem version.
The gem, yeah.
But that's the same for CAS, because they do the same. So
yeah, but I'm not sure if they've seen it. Do they have a gem? Like
they do.
Sure. Are they doing it differently from Githly? I really wasn't sure how they were doing things. Okay, the same.
They described me more or less the same way. They only had to bump it once, because they only changed the API once in 2 years. So they say this is not a real problem for us. But yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Cool. What is the stage that we would have pages or any other component from Githly have the bit where release tools is gathering up the merge changes and bringing them into auto deploys with the release sort of bot doing that step? Does that make any sense? The creating of the
merge
update.
To update.
Yeah. What's the step in our sort of plans that covers that?
It's the managed version update.
That's
after, so it requires this first.
Yes, it's like, okay, great. Because what I want to make sure we think about when we do that, one thing that Myra highlighted in the kind of Githly analysis is the way that failures get alerted on that stuff it doesn't really work well for Githly team. So it might be a good time for us to actually do a review of that when we do that for someone else.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was also thinking at this reviewing the independent deploy blueprint yesterday. And so if I remember correctly, because this is a note that I left in the blueprint itself, that in the requirements, the original version was mentioning the automated version bumping as a requirement for that, which is not accurate because it's actually an alternative. So you want to bump the version file if you want to get continuous delivery, let's say release train actually with auto deploy. So exactly, right. So you get, so that's the if you don't want to get into independent deployment, your top level of automation is automated release bumping and deploy with auto deploy. But if you want to go independent, there's no need to bump the version, because it's the development team that will run their own deployments. So it's a synchronization problem that we still have to figure out then, because we want, how do we know what's the right version? But that's another topic, right? So they will never reach that point about, they could reach and remove if they want to change.
So there's like a decision point earlier then where you basically say, I want either automated versioning or independent deploys.
Yeah, deploys. And I would almost
version updates, because manage you still want managed versioning.
Managed versions,
Yes.
It's how the version that we manage gets into the product that changed. So it's a branching point after this level of automation here.
I would almost say for master. So let's say you're a component and you've adopted independent deploys, whatever that looks like. I would almost say in the GitLab repo for master, the version file should probably contain like independent deploy or something like that, right? Like we should, for master, obviously on the stable branches, that'll reference stuff that we ship. But
yeah, there will always be the problem of build reproducibility and testing. So until we have a good story for that thing, this is going to be a very tough conversation to bring on, say, with engineering productivity. Because right now they know the version. And so for those components who build and test, probably that's the tricky point where we want to untangle the thing, right? So what we build and test today, Gitly, workers, because it's in the same repo, obviously, and I don't know if pages is built or not. That's the thing, right? So maybe what we want to do is not go into that direction for unit testing for the other components, and so find an alternative proposal to give the end-to-end testing.
Yeah.
Which I think is also something that Michele pointed out in the blueprint as well. So
Yeah.
maybe we should just say what is in place today can stay as is, because I don't think we are going to have Gitly independent deployment very soon, especially with the team split they are having and the huge re-architecturing and everything. So that's not a problem at all. And workers is mono-repoed inside, so that's fine as well. We are not doing anything for them because it's already in there. There's no need to synchronize stuff because it's in the same repo. So probably we are in a good spot. I don't know. I know that Pages introduces the first QA test, but I think is in the QA repo. So it goes more in the end into the end-to-end type of testing and is not affecting the unit tests in the.
To be clear, I think like there's unit tests which will run on their code. Some components will run on their code. I've called it out as system level testing. I'm not sure if that's the right level, but yeah, there's this kind of like using the GitLab repo for this like end-to-end integration testing is okay. But yeah, I think we need a better interface. Just like we're seeing now, we need this interface with distribution for packaging. It's almost like a pipeline is, okay, we're going to package it via CNG. Now we need some interface with quality to say, okay, this new component needs to do this like full system, integration testing. Okay, that's fine. And actually thinking about it more, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, if a component and some of the issues we have, if a component goes to independent deploy, aren't we going to have to make release tools go back again now and start going back to that component's deployments to figure out what to tag, if you know what I mean? Because
that's a good question. Yeah.
I guess we have to figure out
yes.
Truth, like what will be the source of truth for an independent deployed component.
That's a good question, and it goes in line with the conversation that I started today on platform, right? So it really depends on what we want to do. I would say that the release metadata is a tracker of packages. So when we ask the packagers to build something which contains stuff, then we track. So without independent deployment, that thing is a valid source of truth because we package first and then we deploy. With independent deployment, this is gonna change, and we have to figure out how we want to revisit this thing. If we want to add extra information there, what do we want to do? Or if we want to track at the project level for their own independent deployment, that's still an option.
We could make because we will own the independent deployment pipeline. We can make a step in that pipeline to populate the release metadata repo with like a component deployment, like independent deployment, and then create the files like under a different subdirectory per component, like independent deployment components. This is their directory with their files of what they've done. That's another, like we can work around that, I guess. And that still keeps everything within the one repo, and we can like use that as the source of truth. It really comes down to, if we want to pull in all of that source of truth into that one repo, that one set of deployments in that repo, and there's one set of files in that repo, or the model of, you have to go to, their repo and see their deployments to see what versions. You have to go to this repo and see their deployments. There's pros and cons to both ways as well. I can see good things and bad things. Probably keeping everything in one repo together might be the easiest, essentially especially for like permissions and just in general, like ease of finding things as a single source of truth. So But yeah, we'll have to figure that out as well. There's certainly got to be some part where we have to, I independently deploy something, it's all fine, thumbs up, and now I need to record that somewhere that it was in GitLab.com at this point in time, and this is what it was, so that, yeah, the rest of the standard monthly, like our packaged release process for self-managed can like accurately determine what to use. I also wonder if I think it's going to be interesting too for things like security releases and things like that. Because so we have to validate, right, that things like security releases have been running on GitLab.com. So let's say your GitLab pages, let's say your pages and your independent deploy. So you're doing your independent deploy. It's kind of like you have to go into your security mirror, merge your thing, do your independent deploy to GitLab.com. Then we have to say, yep, thumbs up, that's running on GitLab.com. And then, you know, essentially package that up for the security release as well. So that's going to be,
yeah, security release is going to be a real tricky part, because the more we give them independence, then they're going to be harder to track, say, backports.
yeah.
And permissions will be an even bigger problem there, right? Because
yeah, permissions, yeah,
permissions on security mirror are very limited. This is the stuff which actually I think ties in, Graham, with what we were talking about on the POC. So Alessio, this morning or earlier today, Graham and I were talking about the POC that Skarbek was mentioning. And that is going to end up being a kind of paired thing, hopefully in a few weeks. So Graham and Skarbek can spend some time working on that. But we were talking a little bit about almost trying to figure out like what are going to be the pain points and like what are the pros and cons as we sort of start to look at those options. Do we have what would be like a high level kind of description for that version tracking? Because I just want to I've got a epic where I'm trying to break these things down. It'd be good just to put a line on that so we don't forget it. Like, is it like single source of truth for independent deployments, or like how would we categorize that whole kind of problem of needing to make sure we know what went out?
It's a single source of truth, or even I would almost use the word ledger of deployments, right? Like you need to be able to see a history of these are the deployments of the component that happened at which point in time. Because I guess when we tag an RC, we just kind of choose literally what is running when you tag it, right? Like we just say, okay, I'm tagging right now, whatever happens to be running right when I do it at that point in time, that's it.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if we want to say, so I'm building my thoughts as I'm speaking. So from one point, we leverage the deployment tracker to find out what's in there, and we're gonna leverage the release metadata deployment tracker. But at the end of the story, what we could be doing is just asking the cluster, what are you running?
It's another option. We certainly can just, I mean, you wouldn't even need to ask the cluster, right? It's probably a metric somewhere.
But that's the point, right? So I'm saying gathering live data from the system itself.
Sure.
So
yeah, sure.
We are fine with what is running right now. What are you running? And build, right?
We probably still need some historical though, right? Like for rollbacks and.
But you have this because these are already. So we're not talking about removing tracking on project levels and things like that, because this gives great value. It gives you an history of what happened, gives you merge request tracking, all the things you need. But this is valuable when you want to roll back, because say, let me see what we deployed before, but that's a different business logic than the business logic related to I'm gonna build
the monthly release.
Because building the monthly release right now is finding what is running in production. And the way we find this is by inspecting the deployment tracker, which that's how we're doing. But we're just reading what's in production and creating a package with those packages inside. This is what we are doing. And this could just, in a world where everything starts with a package, which is the world where we live right now, that's easy, right? Because then it's one package that has all this information and they are all nice and tightly tracked at GitLab repo level, and it just works. But if we are going to change every components independently, because this is what we aim with independent deployment, then keeping track of those values is going to be harder, much harder. So we can just, my goal is still trying to find the information in a single place, which is generic enough for so that we can look at the single information instead of having to go in every single project and having to re-implement this for every time we had a new component.
I think I think having a metric, like we'd have to define a standard metric name and a way that they can expose somehow like the SHA of what they're running, right? Because that's what we need. I think a version number may not be as useful as a SHA. I don't know, one of the two, right? Because we need to populate the SHAs into like the stable branch when we cut it. So, but I think it wouldn't be impossible. We all the components to be, as part of independent deploy, for them to somehow expose a standard metric that we can define with a standard format that is, this is the SHA of what was built or running or the code or what have you. And then we can just, basically query, Prometheus Thanos and just say, get me the version of these components. And then we could even do stuff like confirm how long the component has been running. Like, okay, it's running this version. It's been running for 5 minutes. It's been running for a day. It's been running for, or probably a few hours. I don't know if we care about that. Maybe that's, but I could also do something like combine that with, okay, it's running this release and what is the deployment health of that release? Once again, that's a lot of this is more complicated than what we do now, but it would also allow us to start cross-checking some of those things. Not only is what's the version that's currently running, but make sure it is a healthy version. So you're not just tagging a version that got deployed 5 minutes ago or what have you. That might be the simplest mechanism, making, and then I guess we could probably, if we had that information, it might make things like some ChatOps commands easier, right? Because then you could just go to the metric, or you could even do a dashboard you just dashboard what versions are running on .com. You could just go and there'd be a dashboard there, right? If it's a metric, it's a lot easier to kind of display that data, maybe.
Well, release longevity will still be a problem in any case with the thing that we are describing. I was thinking about this. I think I left a message and a comment in the blueprint about this as well, right? So if some development team merges a lot and we are really focused on giving them a continuous delivery option, this means that some packages will just live for a short amount of time in production because they will be overwritten by the next one, especially during peak hour of working when just merging stuff. So this is something, this is the part that concerned me about this whole thing, right? Because it comes with a great development maturity model, which not necessarily every team has, because changing from deploy once a month to deploy every commit, it's a big change. So I do understand you're gonna build the new components and you are baking this since the beginning, so since day 0 that this is how it will look like, and then this is how you're approaching the problem. But from a component that has already been there, that got deployed once a month or twice or 3 times, depending on how much they were tagging, this is a big change. Knowing that every time you merge something, this will end up in production, and the only things preventing you from breaking something is test coverage and health metrics. That's a big deal.
Do we have the ability to do something in between? Like, on the merge request.
That's the comment that I left, right? So
yeah,
it's all about. I mean, it has more complexity, but usually, what we can see is that there could be say 3 options. One is the release train, which is basically how auto deploy works when you have a schedule. And so again, we do 5 deployments. We know we want to do 5 deployments each day, so we have a schedule. And by the time the train start, whatever is green, whatever is the latest green master, it gets deployed. This is very similar to auto deploy, right? So it's a fixed schedule. You build stuff, you deploy stuff, and if it's ready by the time the train starts, then it goes on the train. If it's not ready, you take the next one. Then do you have there's this other thing which you may have continuous delivery up until the canary stage. So basically with manual promotion, which is still we have in auto deploy, but it's kind of we can think if it makes sense to have this on commit level. So every commit goes new build and goes on canary staging, and then QA, and then production canary, and then QA, and then stop. There's nothing more. Then there is the deliberate choice for development team to go in one of those build and say promote, and this roll out to production. And then the third one, which I think is what is described in the blueprint, is continuous delivery. I think every single commit goes and do all the checks, and every pipeline ends up with a production deployment.
What we can do in GitLab CI though is we can do conditionals based off things like commit messages and stuff. So what we could do is something like if you open a merge request with an empty commit, or even just a normal MR, and you do want to deploy this, and you put like, I don't know, bracket, deploy bracket somewhere in the merge request title. And then we could be like, okay, when that's merged, we do a deploy, but for every other merge request, we don't. Like, I think we might be able to have something where the developers can have some kind of control.
I'm not sure we can, because you have those information in the merge pipeline result, but not in the pipeline running on the default branch once it's merged. So
sorry, maybe I'm not yet. No, I get what you're saying. Sorry, maybe I said the wrong thing. Maybe not in the merge request title, but maybe in the commit. So like if you put a commit with that in the actual git commit, then you might have the ability. That's not a really great option. It's not a great interface, but we might have something where we can, with CI somehow, like maybe you put some, like somehow you have some kind of ability.
Yeah, but
to,
it's still clunky, because if you have 2 maintainers merging 2 things more or less at the same time, one edit the merge message, say no deploy, and the other one edit the merge message and say please deploy, and then depending on the order.
Totally.
Operation, you may get both deployed, only one.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, so I think like a lot of this is kind of implementation detail, which I think like, you know, probably we can like, sounds like we have at least a couple of options. I guess I wanted to just kind of jump back to the kind of original idea and what we have in the blueprint. Like, I guess, so I was thinking about the blueprint kind of as our target state. So do you think that continuous deployment is our target state, or is our target state to actually have like an in-between option of some variety that lets teams choose?
I'm thinking that the target state is giving choice to the team, because a deployment strategy is something that has to take into account the dynamics of the project itself. So just give an example. You may have a component that is a very say slow start. Say you have something like, think about, we are developing Redis as an example, right? So we end up building our own Redis version as a component. And so every deployment is expensive, because maybe we're building our stateful Redis, whatever. So you have to dump the cache and you have to reload, right? So if every commit ends up in a deployment, you never reach peak performance because you're always dumping and loading the.
Yeah. Totally.
So how about we say then the in between is continuous delivery, which is at some point there is a decision that gets made by the team where they basically say, we now want to trigger a deployment, right?
Yeah.
But how specifically we do that, I think we'll need to figure that out because
I think also where we stop the deployment.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Which environment and how we don't destroy continuous deployment sort of cadence. And I think there's like a lot of technical things, but we can certainly figure that out. I think that sounds completely reasonable.
We could even think that at the blueprint level, we describe, say, 3 options, the one that we were talking before, but then on the implementation level, we know which component gonna be our first component,
exactly,
and
right.
we only implement that one that fits their need.
Exactly, that's it, right? We can decide, exactly, we can just expand as we need.
We don't have to give the full options immediately. We just say that's one option, it's already available, so next component, if that option deployment strategy fits your need, you can jump in right now. If not, we are building other features in the.
So the 3 options are a cron style cadence, like a regular scheduled cadence, a fully CD where it's just every commit, every pipeline is going to, do a deployment. And if you have lots of commits, they'll all back up behind each other, slowly deploying through. And then the third option is somewhere between the middle, where it's kind of like you decide on some level of continuous deployment, but then you also give the developers some interface for saying, no, this is the one I would like now to go further.
I think that also for continuous deployment, it would be a nice opportunity for us to try to experiment a bit more with merge train and see if there is an option to detect a merge train and deploy only from the last commit in the train. Yeah,
I agree. I think doing that kind of pipeline optimization, it's the same with the the deployments and environments mechanism, being able to say, okay, this is an old deployment. Like I've got 3 old deployments and here's a new one. We're all waiting. Okay, who's going next? Or rather than go through those 3 old ones, just skip straight to the new one and stuff like that. We can get some efficiencies there, I think. But that comes back to how we mirror, because currently we deploy from ops and everything. So that's comes harder. We can't really do that way easily at the moment, but we'll have to figure that out.
Cool. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think that's the I guess almost the challenge of the blueprint is it's whatever our target state is, right? So I think as long as it's not impossible, we should stick it in there. And then it may be that, the first year of iterations don't get us there, and that's okay. But at least we know what we're working towards.
That's why I want to have options in the target state, because I don't want to be prescribing that's how you should deploy, because every component is different, right? So I want to provide a curated set of options that are all reasonable, but at least you have choice. And then when you develop, you think, what's my target deployment strategy?
Fine. Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense. Yeah. Perfect. Let's get that in. Cool. Are there any actions that we should take from this versioning work? I think I'm going to take an action. I just want to mention we can adjust name or expand or whatever. I do want to just capture this concept of the deployment ledger on the breakdown epic that I've mentioned to you both. If I could find the link, I'll link it. But is there any other actions that we want to take from this conversation? Cool. Okay. If you think about this, I think a lot of it is kind of like feed into the blueprint. So I think that's probably where we'll naturally do that anyway. So awesome. And then I just briefly wanted to mention before we wrap up the end about OKRs. I know you've both heard this several times already this week, but just so we kind of have it all. So what we have on the issue linked is very much proposal of, is there some way we could work with system to set a reasonable Q4 sized OKR around independent deployments? I've added into the orchestration section a little mention about the maintenance policy. Our kind of overarching, I guess not our, one of our big OKRs for Q4 will certainly be to begin implementation, hopefully complete implementation of the maintenance policy extension. So keep that in mind as well. Like, we will be a slightly bigger team. We'll have Matt back. We'll have Steve with us as well. And hopefully we'll hire an additional back-end engineer reasonably easily in Q4 as well. So we will have some additional people, but at the same time, we also know there are holidays and things like that going on. So feel free to just bounce ideas around, discuss, drop things in there which you would like to fix or would be fun to fix. Like, I'm keen that actually, you know, we're excited by the work. So if there is something you'd specifically like us to be working on, feel free to mention it, even if it doesn't fit exactly with the things already on the issue. And then in a couple of weeks' time, we can actually take all the ideas and try and like refine them down to a like probably two OKRs for the quarter.
Okay.
Cool. Is there anything else that we should go through on this demo call? No? Okay, awesome. Well, appreciate all the chats and great. Like, it feels like everything is moving along. Like, I feel like we're probably like pushing that little boulder along, and then like it feels like maybe in a couple of weeks with the CAS Canary stuff hopefully making good progress once the readiness review is unblocked. And hopefully we'll get the version refactor as well in a couple of weeks. And it feels like perhaps that both will actually sort of make quite a big visible jump forward. So appreciate you both continuing to push this along. And cool. I'll chat to you in a couple of weeks.